Or I wonder if people ever experience where they come from such a dramatic life where they always need the stick and they're used to getting the stick, but then they realize that, oh, I don't need the stick. I can actually just learn easily. And then they start learning things easily, and then they're like, oh, it's kind of boring though, because everything's just like, yeah. And then they're just in a space of like apathy because they're like, oh, everything just is like so perfect, like no drama at all.
Yeah. Well, you have to look at that feeling. I miss drama. You know, I miss drama. I miss pain. At least when I was in pain, I knew what I was about. So that's another stage I guess you have to get through and get out of. But mostly when you find joy and peace and happiness, you're really pleased with it. You're not bored with it at all. But you do have to reorient your direction and your attitudes. Because if you've spent your whole life before, let's say, arguing and fussing and complaining and fighting, and now you're past that, then it's like, well, now what do I do with my life? All I know how to do is fuss and complain and argue, and I just kind of outgrown that. So what's next? Yeah, well, you do have to figure those things out. You have to say, oh, well, I could go volunteer at MBT and help save the world, and you find other things to do. You find relationships that are rewarding rather than relationships that are, hitting you with a stick. It takes some time, but you will find how to expand into that positive space. That's just part of the process.
Okay. Thank you, Tom. All right, we're going to move on to Priscilla. Priscilla, you have a question now.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Tom. My question is related to the drama and that positive state for sure. So I'm glad that you guys brought that up because I'm totally relate to that. I also wanted to thank for the MBT community and the MBT volunteer team. My life has completely changed because you guys provided me with great opportunities for being who I am. And so that's wonderful. So thank you very much for that. So my question is related to fear and confusion. How can one handle a state of mind that finds itself in a confusion state? Working on your own fears and having your beliefs challenged mean that a state of mind that is confusing might happen. And if so, how can one make decisions based on that if the answers are not so clear? Do fear tests get deeper and harder to handle as you grow up? Because that's what I've been feeling lately, is that my fears tests are getting, at least to my awareness, deeper. And therefore it's bringing confusion because obviously I don't see the answers, which I understand is great. But at the same time, there's that feeling of wanting to control because you don't see the answers, because it's a new state for myself. For example, I have had myself as well that aha moment where I need to find answers to questions that I didn't have answers before. And that's how I found the MBT team and work. But I find myself lately having dreams where I'm denying God. I'm talking to people and say, wow, that's so beautiful that you believe in God, but guess what? It doesn't exist. So I understand that it's a fear test that is coming out, which I didn't know that I had that belief before, because MBT work was so clear to my mind, even though it's being only aware with the MBT work. I'm also getting those, and I know that we talked about that before, Tom, where I told you that I was getting those sort of, that force field presence beside me, and you told me there was some sort of assurance that I needed to know that I was doing what I was supposed to do in a correct way. And I find myself still having that, which I like it. But now, because I'm in that confusion state, I'm denying it, meaning that last night, for example, I had I woke up in the middle of the night as consciousness, basically. And I denied it. I got angry about it because I was like, because of this mental confusion state, which I don't like it, because I know that it works against my growth. So what are your answer to that?
Okay. When you're in a confused state, that means that you're really also in a growing state. So in a way, it's kind of a good thing, because you're in the process of changing who you are. And in the process of changing, you end up with confusion, because you really don't know who you are, because the who you are is in transition. And that makes you confused. And you've tried different things, different approaches, and some of them feel right and a lot of them don't feel right, and you're not sure whether it feels right or it doesn't feel right. You can't tell the difference, whether it feels good or not good, and you're just not quite sure which way to go. Well, what you do then is you pay attention to everything. You don't need to judge things as whether they're good or bad or right or wrong. Just let them be. All right, in a dream I did this. Okay, you did that. Be with that for a minute. Say, what does that feel like? Where did that come from? How is that? Don't judge it and say, oh, that was a bad thing to do or that was a good thing to do. Don't analyze it. Just let it be. Collect it. So you collect all these various things, and you'll have things that seem to be incompatible with each other. That's all right. Collect things. Let them be incompatible. Feel them. Be with them for a while. And as you make choices in your life where you have to make a choice, so you can just collect things without making choices. You can just let your experience kind of pile up without turning it into a result or a conclusion. Just collect the data without feeling like you have to go one way or another. But as you have to make choices, just make the best choice you can and realize that it might be a good choice. It might not be a good choice. But don't be afraid to make the choice. Make your best choice. Okay, right now, I think this is it. So I'm going to go with that. But I'm going to pay attention to how does that work out? How does that work out? How does that change things, my dynamics, my relationships, my connections, my understanding? And let that go for a while. And then you may think that, oh, that didn't really take me anyplace very good. Well, let me go the other way for a while and see how that works out. You see, it's trial and error. Growing up is a lot of choices. We don't know the right choice. It would be so simple if we could just look in a book and say, all right, now in your life, this is the right choice. Well, we don't have that. We don't know. It's always a trial and error. You have to investigate. And investigate means you do some research. Well, that research means you just collect data. You don't try to judge the data. You collect it, you feel it, and then you explore it. I'll explore it this way and that way. And I'll look at it in different ways, and I won't try to analyze it and judge it. I'll just be it. So it's okay that you dream this or dream that, or even if they're incompatible, or that you get angry, but just be with that and say, okay, I was angry there. Why was I angry there? What was it about that was upsetting me? Where was that getting crosswise with my fear? And then let it go. So just have confidence that in time you will progress through all of that, and you will come out the other side in a better place where you are now. You just don't know where that better place is going to be and what it's going to be like, and that's all right. It's all right. It'll be whatever it is. So go through life with confidence, with positivity, let things be the way they are, learn from it, think about them. Think about how the things you do, what does that have to do with your understanding? What does it have to do with your fear? What does it have to do with your beliefs? Could some of your beliefs be wrong or your understanding wrong? Well, maybe. Let's see how it works. Here's the choice I'm going to make next because I think that's a good choice. And then you observe it. Where did that take you? Are you better off? And you may go down a path for 6 months before you decide to back up, that path isn't in a good direction and go a different way. And that's fine. Life is like that. So the problem you have is that you're a bit afraid of the unknown, of where you're going, and you don't know what the right answer is. So if you don't know what the right answer is, then you don't know And it's like, well, I can't choose if I don't know what the right choice is. Well, that will just stop you from making any choices at all and stop you from growing. So you just make your best choice. And if 2 or 3 choices seem like they're all equally valid, just randomly pick one. Think of it as an experiment. And then I'm going to go that way until I see where that takes me. And if that takes me to a more positive place or a less positive place, a more useful place or a less useful place. And you have to live your whole life like that, Priscilla, where no, you don't know the answers. If you knew the answer, you wouldn't be in the spot that you're in now. You have to figure out the answer. And you don't have to know the right answer in order to make a choice. Just make your best choice and see how that plays. Go forward, back up, try again. That's the nature of growing up, is trial and error. Sure, you'll do things wrong, you'll make mistakes. Okay, that's all right, you'll learn from them eventually. As long as you stay aware of the results, the consequences of your choices and where that's taking you, then you'll figure it out. So you go down a wrong path, that's not a problem. You'll see the consequences aren't very positive in your life, and you can say, well, that's not such a good way. Well, why is it wrong? And you'll have to think about that. What is it about it that's negative or fear-driven or ego-driven or belief-driven? Because all those things will create problems. So then you back up and change. So life is like that. And don't be afraid of the choice you make. You can always back up and try again. Life is not so harsh that if you make one wrong choice, you're sunk. It doesn't work that way. You can always learn and grow. But you do have to be careful about how you affect other people. You know, how your choices affect relationships. That's important. It's not just about you, it's how it affects everybody. So have courage, go on, don't worry too much, don't take it too seriously, live, have fun, and always stay aware of whether you're making progress or you're making degress. You're going in the wrong direction. Change accordingly.
Right on. Tom, thank you so much.
Awesome. Okay, so we've got about 20 minutes left. We're going to wrap up with some final questions. If anyone hasn't asked a question, now's your time. We're going to go over to Sarah. Sarah, you have a question for Tom.
Thanks. Yes. Tom, I wanted to ask a question about meditation trouble. I for the longest time felt like there was a part deep in me that never rested, not even when I was asleep. And then I thought, well, I'm making this up. It doesn't happen to other people. And so then I had a session with a woman who I work with and I really trust. And I didn't even tell her anything, but then she said, oh, that's so weird. You have a part in you that never rests, not even when you sleep. This is so weird. So, and I think that's the reason that I can't meditate. So I just wanted, I don't know, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, well, you may have parts in you that never rest. Some people do. That's, in some ways we could call that obsession, parts that you just have to keep cranking on and keep thinking about, and maybe fears that won't go away, or concerns, worries. People who are worriers, who tend to worry about things, those worries tend to just go on in the background all the time, and it's hard for them to walk away from those worries. So you may indeed have a part of you that is worried, that is fearful of what might happen, fearful of the future, fearful that you'll do things wrong, or that you won't be able to do things right, that you'll fail in whatever it is you feel like you need to do and want to do, that you're not actually progressing, you're not making progress, so you feel kind of failed. And if that bothers you to where you obsess on that, which means obsession just means that you can't let go of it. That's all obsession means. It means you can't just walk away from it. It's there all the time. You keep thinking about it. And even when you're not thinking about it, it's still crunching away somewhere in the background. So I don't mean obsession in a really a negative sense. I just mean it in the sense that you can't let go of something.
Let go of something even when you're asleep, and I don't even know what that thing. I mean, like, I think I have been this way for as long as I remember. I don't even know how to access it. I don't know how to say it.
Yeah. Well, when you're asleep, you are processing all kinds of things in your sleep. I mean, there's a lot of people who, if they are very tense or they have a lot of anxiety, they'll grind their teeth all night long. You know, they end up going to a dentist and getting some kind of thing that they put in their mouth to keep them from doing that. They'll have problems with their jaw, and their jaw muscles would be sore when they wake up in the night. You know, for people to process stress and fear and discomfort, that's pretty normal in your sleep. When you're sleeping, your consciousness is kind of free to do what it needs to do. And processing things that bother you is what it does a lot. A lot of your dreams have to do with what's going on in your life, things that are happening to you, and you're trying to process them. It also has to do with things you're getting ready for. You'll do work in dreams, getting ready, getting prepared for something that's going to happen in the future. That happens too. Sometimes you take tests. So dreams are busy places. They're not just empty. You don't lie down and go to sleep and just be empty. Even the people who don't remember their dreams, they have the dreams and they're processing things. They just don't remember. It never gets up to their intellect. It stays down beneath their intellect. So what do you do about that? Well, I guess meditation is a good thing. You just have to put those thoughts away. If your mind tends to go to those things you're processing, and it will in a meditation, as you start to empty your mind will just kind of move over to the things that you're obsessed with, the things that worry you, the things that nag at you. And those things will pop up. Well, when they do, put them out of your mind. Go back and put them out of your mind. And they keep coming up, keep putting them out of your mind. And eventually, they'll stay away longer each time. In the beginning, most new meditators can keep their mind empty for about 5 seconds, and something will come into their mind and they'll put that away. But 3 or 4 or 5 months later, they can go all the way up for 10 minutes before things come crashing in and their attention gets moved to something else. So the meditation is a good way to put your things that you obsess over, the things that are hard to let go of, to let them rest, put them aside for a while. So are you successful with that, Sarah, when you meditate? Can you get these things aside?
I can put them aside, but I'm not successful with meditation. And I have been practicing for 5 years, and I have not been lazy with practicing it. I have been really practicing it for 5 years. And no, I have had no success with meditation. Even if I put the thoughts aside, I still don't rest deep enough to go into meditation. Does it make sense? I feel it's the same restlessness.
Okay, well, what about your thoughts when you meditate? Thoughts come in and then you put them aside, and then they come back in and you put them aside. How long can you go before they come back in?
I don't know how long.
Yeah. Well, be aware of that. If it's a short time, that's okay. A lot of people start that way, when they first meditate. So just try to make it a little longer each time. Keep track of how long it takes you before a thought comes in. And when that thought comes in, say, oh, no, thought, we're not doing that now. We're just sitting here resting, being empty. Push this thought out. And then start the clock again, in a sense. And see how long you can go before a thought comes in. And if you have the intention to go longer and longer times, it may take you years, but you should find that you are able to keep those thoughts out for longer and longer times, just by practicing and having a strong intent to do so. Don't just accept it and say, well, that's just me. It's the way I am. The thoughts keep come in. You have to have that intention that says, no, I want to change. I want to be able to make those thoughts stay away for 10 seconds instead of just 5 seconds. And
Okay.
then,
So you think the problem is just the thoughts and not the restlessness itself?
well, the restlessness is there, but I think you have to, when you meditate, you have to work with that restlessness and try to tame it.
Okay.
Have you done that, or do you just meditate and find that it doesn't work? But
I just meditate and find that it doesn't work. I feel like I can't quite access where the restlessness is. I don't know how to explain it.
Well, you don't have to access where it is. You just have to tell it to stop, to go away, and then go back to, saying your mantra. If you say a mantra, that's a good way to do it, because that fills your mind with a nonsense sound. Use a mantra like saring, saring. That's a good sound, and just say that to yourself. And when the thought comes in, say, "Oops, no, saring, saring." Just put the sound back in your mind again. So it helps fill your mind with a non-operative thing. And filling your mind with a non-operative thing is better than having your mind operate on something else. Right. So if you practice that and go back to a mantra, or go back to focusing on your breath or whatever else you do in meditation, then try to do that. But another thing to do is, when in your meditation, is then face it directly. Say, well, what is it? What is this anxiety? What is it about? And you say, okay, anxiety, go. Show me, what are you? What is this all about? And feel it. Then just be quiet and let your awareness go to that anxious place, that place that won't be still. And you may have to do this, 10 or 20 times, where you just sit there and let that anxiety flow over you and through you until you find out what's the origin. What is it? What's the fear? What is it there that disquiets me so much? And it could be something general, like, life in general bothers me because I'm not in control, and I'm fearful of the unknown, and therefore I need control. And I don't have control, and that makes me nervous. And it's this nervousness that I'm getting. So at least then you'll understand it and be able to work with it.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, or it could be something specific that's bothering you. It could be something in your life, something you did that you feel guilty about, that you've never let go of, or who knows what it might be. Mm-hmm. But let it express itself. And at first it might be timid, and it might kind of hide, and you'll just get a feeling. Well, then the next time, encourage it to express. How does it feel? Feel it. And it may take, again, months, but find out what it is. So that's another thing you can do. So do both those things. Try to tell it to go away and make it stay away. That would be your meditation route. Otherwise, just get into a quiet space and deal with it. Express it. And if it's like a very, shy child, well, you'll have to coax it out.
Mm-hmm.
Baby talk to it, coax it out. I'm not going to hurt you. Just let me see you. What is this? Where is this fear coming from? Why do I feel so tense? About what? And then you'll just see what pictures will flash into your mind over the next 2 or 3 seconds. And then follow up with those and see, well, what did that mean? And how might that be related to it? And keep picking at it until you unravel it.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, that's a very good idea. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Great advice. Thank you, Tom. All right, so let's pass it over to Nathan.
Thanks, Vanessa. Hi, Tom. It's good to see you. And thanks for being here and answering our questions. Mine is inspired by a personal question, but I'm going to keep it kind of broad so that maybe it can be applicable to other people too. I know that you talk about, the importance of staying engaged with people and relationships and interacting with the world as a way of expressing who we are and making choices that help us grow, and not being a monk in a cave somewhere. And my question is, if someone has that kind of default, like they like being engaged, they like being connected, and as part of their authenticity, they're actually feeling drawn to actually being, for a period of time, like much more remote, like much more quiet, much less involved with different things, and maybe an emphasis on like more meditation, which also I remember you saying, oh, like, you know, an hour a day, you know, and then just be involved with the rest of your life. And, you know, I'm feeling, for instance, drawn, like, I want like a lot of meditation these days. I don't know why, but I want a lot. And I want to like withdraw from things. Even going on like a year-long sabbatical that doesn't make sense. I made a choice that wasn't intellectual at all. I just one day made this choice and it felt right. So what role might, not necessarily a short period of time, but not like a lifestyle of always being isolated, but maybe a good chunk of time just being with yourself and in meditation, what role might that play in sort of a larger arc of development? And what pitfalls might someone want to kind of stay aware of to have that time be productive before it ends?
Okay. Well, in general, when I say things like stay balanced, okay, don't get out of balance, you have to take that with a grain of salt. You know, it's not, that's not an edict that you must stay, you know, perfectly balanced all the time. That means that over a long period of time, maybe over a year, try to stay balanced, or maybe over 2 years or 5 years, try to stay balanced. So sometimes you might spend, you know, 4 or 5 hours every day in meditation. Okay. And that's okay, but you can't do that forever. If your whole life is that way, then you're probably missing some important things in your life. On the other hand, you see, you may need that 4 hours a day to move in a direction you want to move. That may be a good thing, and you may do that. And then you may find after you do it 4 hours a day, you're going to do it 6 hours a day. But then after maybe doing it 6 hours a day for 6 months, it feels like that's enough. So then you may quit altogether, not meditate anymore. The thing that's bad is if you get stuck. I'm doing this because 4 hours a day is the correct amount of time, and I'm always going to do it 4 hours a day. Now, that's a belief. And if you get into a belief, you get stuck. Or I'm going to always meditate at least some. Well, that's a belief too. There may be months or years that you don't meditate at all because you're engaged in doing something else. So life isn't always smooth and perfectly balanced all the time, you know, but over a block of time, it should be in balance. But what is a good balance for you isn't necessarily a good balance for somebody else. Your balance is going to be your own. So the thing to do is always be aware of your effectiveness in life. What's the effectiveness of what you're doing, of your choices? Now, effectiveness means, you know, how are they taking you closer to being whole, being love, caring, being part of the solution, helping other people? You know, if you come to the conclusion, well, not so much. All right, meditating 6 hours a day was very helpful for a while. I really learned to get discipline with my consciousness and my mind. I learned discipline, and that was hard for me because I'm ADD, and discipline is really tough. So I needed 6 hours a day for a year before I got that discipline. Well, okay, that's fine. But you can't just do that then forever. Now that you've got discipline, well, let's go back into the world and see what that discipline can do to help other people, to create good relationships. You see, so you don't do things because that's what you think you should do. Do things because it's working for you. It's being helpful. You can see that you're making progress. See, that's the problem with the intellect. The intellect wants to slice and dice everything up into neat little pigeonholes. All right, I'm going to meditate for this much time a day, and then I'm going to spend this much time a day with my family, and this much time a day at work, and this much time a day with my dog. And you have all these things you need to do, and then you just kind of plug in for the appropriate amount of time and unplug and plug into the next thing. And that's your intellect trying to run your life. It's much better if you're just organic. You run your life the way it seems right to you, the way that seems significant and effective. And if you're not being effective, I'm really not meditating 6 hours a day because I'm gaining things. I'm meditating 6 hours a day because I'm running away from things. that life is difficult out there. You know, that stuff and those people and those relationships are hard and they cause me concern and anxiety. So I just meditate 6 hours a day and that makes me feel better. Well, see, now that meditation is ineffective. It's hurting you. It's not helping you. There may be times in your life where your children or your family or your friends or your business or whatever you're doing will consume all of your energy. And you don't have any inclination to meditate. You're totally consumed with this thing. Well, that's okay. But again, you don't want to live your life like that. You know, if you're totally consumed in something your whole life, you'll burn out. You'll find a problem. So you just poke your way through life one step at a time, constantly thinking, how am I making progress? How am I being part of the solution? Well, right now I'm going to drop out of life and drop out of being part of the solution and just work on my meditation and my discipline. All right, that's okay. Do that. But don't run away from the life because it's hard. And that means you have to be honest and aware of yourself to make those choices, because you can always trick yourself. Your ego will always say, oh, I'm not running away. I'm just, growing spiritually every day, every way. I'm just keep on going like this. When the real reason is you're hiding out. So your ego can give you misinformation. So you have to be aware of that and know how effective am I being in the world? How effective am I being? Am I making myself so that I'll be more effective when I go back out into the world? Or am I just doing this because it feels good and it's easy and there's no stress? And I like easy and no stress. And the world is not easy and has lots of stress. So I'll just stay here and meditate. And I will go live in a cave and be a monk. And that's an easier thing to do. So you see what I mean? It's not so much what you do as why you're doing it. So yes, you can take times where you're kind of excessive one way or the other, but in the long run, you need to stay balanced. You need to be effective in the world. You need to effectively learn to discipline your mind so that you can get it to do what you want it to do when you need it to do that. And all of it takes time. You need to be with your relationships. If you have, a wife, you have kids, you have parents, you have friends, you have people that you interact with in your life. Well, you need to give that some time. So are you being effective in those relationships? Or are you just using what suits you and letting the rest go? Well, that's not being very effective there. So that's what you should do. Go do where your intuition tells you to go. Go there. Intuition's generally pretty smart. But keep check on yourself, because sometimes that ego will pretend to be your intuition. Sometimes your belief will pretend to be your intuition. And you go out there to get that important thing you're supposed to do, and the answer comes back exactly what it is you want to hear. Great. Confirmation. Could just be your ego or it could be your belief, telling you what you want to hear. So be skeptical always. So that assessment of whether you're being effective has to always come from skepticism. Not from what makes me feel good, because to a lot of people, running away and hiding makes them feel good because they find the outside world to be very stressful. It's not about feeling good. It's about being effective. And that means effective for you, for yourself and for everybody that you interact with and for the world in general. You should be effective in all those spaces.
And it seems kind of tricky because, as you've said, and I've found it to be true, the best litmus test for what we're doing is, how are your relationships? How are the interactions going with people in your life? And then when someone's withdrawing, there's a really important feedback process that kind of inherently gets limited if it's there at all. And so even more opportunity for ego and, stuff to say like, how spiritual you are. And,
Yeah.
there's no real interaction. So that's really helpful. Like skepticism really has to be very turned on strongly.
Yes, you have to be effective. It's just sitting in a cave being effective in the world. You're here in this world. Is that being effective? Well, if you're learning leaps and bounds and growing and changing, yes, it's effective, because you can be more effective in the world if you grow up more. But if it's a slow process, then maybe you need to also get plugged into that world and interact with it as you grow. You may find out you can get as much growth out of a half an hour a day as you can out of 2 hours a day. Well, you won't know until you try. Again, life is an adventure. It's an exploration. It's a cut and try kind of process. It's a let's do this and see how it works. And then you have to be very skeptical and very honest in assessing how's it working. And when you say how's it working, it's not just how's it working for me. It's how's it working for everybody connected to me. How's it working for the world? How's it working for humanity? You're a piece of humanity and you can contribute. Are you contributing anything? You have relationships. Do you contribute to those relationships? You also need to grow yourself. Are you growing yourself? Those are all things that you need to be aware of. And if you're doing okay, and yes, I'm contributing, my relationships are good, I'm contributing to the world in some way, and I'm growing up, good. Well, you got a good mix there. Keep doing it. And then suddenly the relationships may change. Suddenly they may need more of your help in those relationships. Something happened. You have to be there for them. Well, then maybe you let some of the other things go. Because in this phase, you're going to be more helpful because that's what you need to be doing now. So stay fluid, stay aware, cut and try, make choices, but always judge the results of those choices with skepticism.
Thank you, Tom.
Great question, Nathan. All right, TT, wonderful TT's up.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your question, Nathan. That was really interesting. Well, I do have a question about anger. And maybe we all now and then get into conversations with other people who are not particularly MBT followers about various things. And so sometimes I get into conversations about anger, and I sort of try to get to provide small taste bites of the MBT way of looking at anger, because I discovered that people, they like their anger weapon. and it's hard to motivate or something, inspire people to dig into it and see what the fear that is behind it, and that it's actually very destructive, because many people think it's a very good weapon to have, because then I get it the way I want to, and I can just get it out and then I feel good. Mm-hmm. So I wonder, how would you explain that in a simple way for people? How would you advise that how could you explain anger in a good way that motivates people to get rid of it?
Well, people are going to be angry because they have fear. It's the fear that creates their anger. That fear also creates self-centeredness. They get angry because life and the things in their life are not the way they want them. And that makes them angry. People aren't the way they want them. That makes them angry. These people should not be doing that. They should be this other way. They shouldn't think this. They should think some other way. So you get angry when your life isn't the way you want it. Well, that's mostly your ego. I want things to be the way I want it because the way I want it is the best way. And everybody, no matter what side of whatever issue you're on, everybody feels like the way they want it is the best way. Okay, so you have to be aware of that. So the person that comes on with anger is using anger, to bully you. Oh, if you're a gentle person and somebody comes on with anger, then you just say, yeah, okay, have it your way. So the angry person is maybe using it as a tool, as you say, a weapon. Well, that's a possibility, but you have to not let that affect you. You have to not, it only can be a weapon used against you if you allow it. So if people are angry and you want to help them see that anger is dysfunctional, the way you do that is not show any anger back. The way you do that is smile in the face of their anger. Be positive always. Let them be who they are. If they're angry, and you can't fix that. So here they are, and they're off on a rage about something isn't the way they want it. And you just have to listen and not argue with it. Be happy. Say, well, okay, but if you feel that way, your life is going to be full of stress, because if you go around demanding that people agree with you, and they don't, and that makes you angry, your life is going to be full of stress. What? Your choice. And that's not an argument. And you stay happy, and they can be however they want to be. You're not trying to change them. You're not trying to convince them that their anger is even wrong. You just let them be, and I think eventually they'll realize that their anger is dysfunctional, makes them unhappy, makes them miserable. So you just don't buy into that anger. If their anger then gets you angry, you're not listening to me. You're just angry and you're not listening to me. Listen, that won't help. Let them be angry. Let them say whatever they need to say. Don't oppose it. You don't have to fight back. You can say, well, I disagree. You don't have to agree to it. You can say, well, I disagree with that. And I disagree with it for this reason. Here's why I don't feel that way. Here's why I'm not angry. And they may not accept that, but that's okay. But then that ends it, you see. What keeps it going is when you disagree back and then get angry with them. Then it goes on and on and on and gets really destructive for both people. But if you just listen and let it go, and you can, you don't have to bow down to it. You can disagree. Don't argue, though. Arguing makes an angry person angrier. That just throws gasoline on a fire. So that's the way I would say that for most people. Now, there's various situations. I'm just trying to tell you in general, general situations. Don't respond to anger with anger. Don't respond to it with lectures or telling people that that's the wrong way to be, or if you stay angry all the time, you're going to drive yourself crazy. Well, that's a criticism. You're telling them that they're wrong. They're doing something wrong. They're not doing it the right way. Nobody likes to be told they're doing something wrong, and they push back. Well, you think I'm doing it wrong? I'll do it twice as much. So you have to let them be however they are, and don't, stay positive. And when you say something to them about how you feel or why you don't agree with them or why you don't, why you see it differently, say, well, I see it differently, and explain why. And if they come to you, well, if you're not angry about this, then you just don't understand. Anybody who had a heart would be angry at this terrible thing that's going on. We need to do something about it. You can say, well, yes, I agree. That's not a good thing. We should do something about it, but I think being angry about it just makes it worse. So I'm not going to get angry about it, because that's part of the problem, not part of the solution. We don't need more angry people in the world. We need more calm, reasoned people in the world. So I'll just stay calm and reasoned, if you don't mind, and I'll deal with it that way. You see, and if you don't buy into the anger, it takes the wind out of their sails. They're looking for you to come back at them. They're looking for you to disagree. And that then is what they do. That's how they make themselves feel good about themselves, is because they're right and you're wrong. They know and you don't. But if you just let them be with whatever knowledge they have and just disagree with them, but don't argue back, then that inside, they have to process that. And that'll help them outgrow the anger. They'll see that there are ways to be helpful and to work, again, work for change, work against that terrible thing that don't require anger. So anyway, I think that's the response to anger, is you don't feed it. It's like feeding trolls. You know, if you feed the trolls, you just make the trolls more vicious. You energize them if you feed them. It's the same with feeding anger. You just make it more vicious if you feed it, or it gets to where it's a cycle. You know, every time, you know, person A meets person B, then you know there's going to be an argument. They look forward to that argument. Being angry becomes a part of their life and the way they are. It's just how they present themselves. And it uses them up. It's not good. And I think if they see that there's ways that you can actually be part of the solution without being angry, they'll find that that's actually better. It may take them 6 months to figure that out, but that's leading by being a good example. But then you need to do those things. You need to show them that you can be positive, that there's things that you can do. And that if all you're doing is running around being angry, you're not really helping anybody. You're just feeding your own ego. You're not being effective. I don't know, does that help, Titi?
Yes, it helps a lot. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Great question, TT. Sylvia, over to you.
Thank you. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Sylvia.
So, you know, I think all of us probably experience this to some degree, that as we go through MBT, there are different facets that we focus on it at any given point in time. And I've sort of recently been focusing on another aspect, and it reminds me a little bit, I don't know if anybody ever reads the food writer Michael Pollan, but, you know, he writes all these books about food, and they're, you know, long and many chapters and different books. But at the end of the day, he says, look, it's simple. Eat real food, not too much, mostly plants. And that's, you know, and sort of you can kind of take that away and you don't have to read all the detail. But if you eat real food, not too much, mostly plants, you'll probably be okay. And that's kind of the gist of it. So, you know, I find for me, it's helpful to have like a simplified thing to think about as, you know, I'm navigating the world and, you know, experiencing difficulties and trying to get through them gracefully. Anyway, so with that as context, I think my little, you know, Michael Pollan-esque kind of mantra is sort of accept what is, be positive, and hold things lightly. And I think for me, really the holding things lightly is the big revelation. Like you can have this gear. And again, I'll just have one bit more explanation. When I was going through some health issues and I spoke to you and you're like, yeah, you know, there's probably some more stuff coming, and yeah, this is a little difficult, but I think you'll be fine to try and stay positive. But if you do die, well, that's not such a big deal either. you had me for that first bit, and then, you know, and I think that's a sort of extreme, you know, sort of example of, you know, well, you can hold things lightly and be like, yeah, I may die, I probably won't, but, you know, I may. And, you know, that idea of holding things lightly, I know it certainly helps me feel like I can find a gear that I can pop into. I have to remind myself sometimes, like when I'm getting worked up about something, and be like, hang on, you know, can you hold this lightly? And then, you know, find a gear. Anyway, I just offered that as a reflection and wanted to get your comments on that. Okay.
Well, tell us those three things again. Be aware, hold things lightly.
Accept what is.
Accept what is.
Be positive, and hold things lightly.
Oh, those are very good statements. Yes, holding things lightly is a very important part of it. It, you know, if you see life as an experiment, you know, you're in this life and you have choices, and you don't know the answers to all the choices. I mean, we don't come with an instruction book about life and, well, this is your best choice here and there's your best choice, and we keep looking for that instruction book. We read and listen to people and go to events, and we keep hoping to find that instruction book, but it doesn't exist. But if you hold things lightly, as you put it, that means that you really see life as an experiment. This could go that way, not necessarily. It could go some other way. this could be a good choice, and it might be a bad choice, but I think it's the best choice. So we'll go do it and see how that works, and stay aware of what the results are. Just go through life with that kind of an attitude, is that you do the best you can with the information you've got. Pay attention to the effectiveness and what happens, what's the result of that, and then make your next choice better informed because of the last choice. And if you go through life that way, then there's very little pressure. There's very little anxiety, because you let things happen, as you say, and you approach everything with a positive attitude. There's nothing negative there. There's never any failure if you do that. It's impossible to fail. All you can, the worst thing you can do is the best thing that happens, which is you learn a lesson. So, that makes life then a positive exploration through the possibilities. And if you can see it that way, then you'll be happy and you'll hardly have any stress or any anxiety about it, because, okay, I do this and I think this is my best choice. I may die, but if I do, the rest of the people will have to deal with that, right? If it happens, then, my kids will deal with it. My husband will deal with it, it'll just happen. And life will go on for others and not for me. And I'll go get another life. Try it again. It's not really a big deal. People have to deal with what they have to deal with. So you make your choices. Say, well, I think instead of just staying home and seeing what happens, I'm going to go see a doc and see if there's maybe something they can do about it. Well, that's a choice. So then you go do that. And, then you make your next choice and your next choice. But being fearful about the unknown, being fearful about not making the right choice and making mistakes, being fearful about, that you would die and leave other people, and how would they get along without you? Well, they'd have to get along without you, and they would. And their life would go on, and, other things would happen, and eventually it's memory, and it's fine. So there really isn't anything that has to end up badly. And there's a lot of joy in that. There's really nothing in life that has to end up badly. Everything's okay. As long as you are honest and skeptical and trying to do the right thing, then by definition, everything in your life is all right. Well, no anxiety. There that goes. No worries. None of that, crunching away on stuff like Sarah, talking about, those are worries, things that upset you, things you're not at peace with, things you haven't let go of, and you grind on those things. They all go away if you can accept life that way. So I think you're right. That's a very short way of expressing kind of the right way to approach all of life. Things will take care of themselves. People will have to deal with what they have to deal with. Okay, everybody, in your family now are all adults. You don't have any little children anymore. Well, they can deal with things. And even if they were little children, something would take care of them. It would work out. Somehow they would get along. And if their life turned out to be hard, well, they'd learn from that and it would be okay. They'd get through it. People deal with hardships and come out the other side all the time. This idea, no, I want this to be perfect for them and I have to do this, and you get all the stress and stuff builds up. You just let all that go and say, it'll all work out. Everything will work out fine. So you leave maybe young children behind because you get a disease and you die. Well, that's not the way you thought life should be, but if it's the way life is, then they'll have to deal with it, however they do. And that'll just be that kind of a reality for them, where they got a hard bump to get over early in life. And yes, that'll change them some, but that's their opportunities. There's growth in that as well. And it's not their last opportunity. It's just the next opportunity. Yeah. So, so that's a big picture. You see, that's what I talk about when I talk about that is the big picture. And if you have that big picture, then it's really, your ego starts to go away too, because it's not like I need it to be this way. Well, why do you need it to be this way? Because I've got life arranged for the future for, 10 different people, and it needs to come out that way. Well, if you let all that go, then your ego doesn't have as much stuff to do. And if you just let things happen and accept them as they are, your belief doesn't have that much to do. So you end up just growing up just because you have that attitude. Makes it easier to grow up. So does that help some? Does that make sense?
It does. I think there's just the one tiny follow-on is it just relates to TT's question. I think the trickiest bit I've found in sort of having this philosophy or, using that sort of hold lightly idea is like TT said, when people are, angry or whatever, there really is no way to communicate, I've found, with them. I found it challenging because they always want to draw you into it's about the thing. And you're trying to say it's not about the thing, it's how you react to the thing. And that makes them angry too. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's
absolutely.
That's almost like patronizing to say to someone. So that's a tricky thing. So I think it's almost easier if you realize that someone doesn't want to have the conversation you want to have. You've just got to let them vent their anger and be like, oh, I understand. That's difficult. Oh, yeah. So, and it's almost like you can't totally be your genuine self and say the things you want to say because it's not going to be helpful to them.
Exactly. That is true. You have to, there are times to tell the truth, the whole truth, and be exactly, the way you feel. And there's times to keep your mouth shut and just not say anything and listen. And you have to know when to do each. But you have to think about how does what I'm going to say, how is it going to affect this person and this situation? And if you realize that what I'm going to say is just going to make it worse, well, then just don't say it. That's not an appropriate thing to say then, even if that's the truth. You just let it go. They're not capable of hearing the truth and dealing with it and accepting it. So pushing it down their throat isn't going to improve the situation. It's just going to make it worse. Absolutely. When people are venting their anger, mostly all you can do is listen. And when they finally run out of steam, you can give them something very positive, but not argue with them and then let it go. And if it starts them off on another, well, you can let them run out of steam again. And then you can, maybe say nothing at all. Even if something positive is upsetting to them, then you just let it go. Nothing to be said. When they're done, they find silence at the other end. That's a statement as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to wrap up with one more question from Seabrat. Before we do that, though, I just wanted to comment on Sylvia's question around the anger and trying to communicate with folks who have anger, because I find a lot of my friends, I don't know why, but a lot of my friends, like more than half of them, are freedom fighters. I don't know if that freedom fighter, I don't know if that's a term that many have heard of. It's like they think that COVID is a hoax and the government is in on this conspiracy. and I don't feel that way, but I also don't shame them. And yet I feel like a lot of them have actually stopped being friends with me because I don't see the world the same way that they do. And yeah, I just find that I can't even really have a conversation with them because they're so stuck on their way of seeing things that they're not open to any other perspectives. So
yeah, well, that may happen as you grow up, Vanessa. The friends you have will probably change. You won't have the same friends because you'll be different. You're a different person, and when you're a different person, you'll make different friends. And you may go through a period where you don't have many friends, or maybe you don't even have any friends, or maybe just one or two really close friends. And that's fine. That's okay. But you will meet people and you'll get new friends. And there are friends that you can interact with and be, honest with and talk to. So if your friends kind of, if you aren't able to speak with them, let your friends go if you don't find that it's fun being around them. But if you just are quiet and still have fun being around them, then that's fine. Keep your friends. Just don't discuss politics with them. This idea that you should only have friends that agree with you so you can be yourself, that's not true. I have lots of friends that are of all sorts of people, have all kinds of beliefs and ideas and fears and ego. And, I'm friends with them. That's fine. I let them be however they are. And I'm careful I don't say anything that pushes any of their buttons. And that's fine. So it's people are like that, and you can't say things to people that cause problems. I shouldn't say you shouldn't say things to people if you know it's going to raise entropy. If you're going to set them off, that's not helpful. And you feel that way, and that's the discussion, and you would like to say something, but you know that it would be counterproductive, so you don't. Yeah, that's conversation. Communications have to be limited to what you think will be helpful to the person you're talking to. There's a lot of things that I don't say to people. A lot of things I could say to people that I don't say to people because I come to the conclusion that it wouldn't be helpful. They wouldn't be able to take that and do something positive with it. So you just don't say it. If there's somebody that does not have the experience that I have, then I don't tell them about the experience that I've had that is unlike theirs because they won't be able to process it. You process things through pattern matching. And if you don't have any pattern in your experience base to match that to, you're lost. Then you start making things up, coming up with beliefs and other things that are not useful. So it's better for me not to talk about those things. That's why when people say, Tom, tell me about your adventures in, the larger reality, I don't answer that. Vanessa, you've asked me that question a whole bunch of times, and I've always slip out the back and never answer you. And that's why, because it's not helpful to people. All they can do is form a belief about it. And the belief is not going to be true because it would only be a correct belief if they've been there and they've had that experience. So you don't just tell people things because you know them and you think it might be helpful to them if they knew it, because it won't be helpful to them if they're not able to process it. So you have to be careful what you say to people, that you don't say too much. You don't say things that are inappropriate.
Yeah, so be like really other focused and thinking about what would best serve them and not about what I want to talk about because it's so interesting to me.
Right. And that's the same thing that Didi was mentioning. You're talking with somebody that's angry or that's upset. You don't try to convince them that they're wrong. That's not going to work. It's just going to make things worse. Now, if you're going to sit down and debate somebody, okay, now you can try to convince them of your point and they convince you, that's called a debate. But as soon as it gets out of hand and starts going into ego, belief, and fear, well, then you start to back off and you stop saying things until you withdraw from that dysfunctional interaction.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
Last question over to you, Seabrant.
Oh boy, am I last? No, I want to keep it very short, and because we've been here for a while now. And Tom, I just wanted to say, in this general discussion, also, it's about the intention behind the attention, isn't it? I mean, and that's just two emotions that can come out of, and that's either love or fear. And if I try to or make a point to people or get into a discussion where a lot of the stuff from MBT is it's not in the mainstream. It's very hard to talk to people about it. So you try to adjust your metaphors a little bit there. But in the end, it's always the intention behind the intention, isn't it, Tom? I mean, and that's out of love and fear. And if you can recognize that, and if you always use that attention from love, then nothing can go wrong, really.
Exactly. So when somebody comes up and comes at you with an argument and they're angry, and your intention is to set them straight, your intention is to fix them, and your intention is to make them see it the way you see it, Well, you realize all that intention is coming right out of your ego. Yeah, that's just an arrogant intention that I know you don't, and I need to fix you by telling you what you should think instead of what you do think. And when you come out of ego and arrogance, then you get a dysfunctional result. Exactly. That's the way it is. And you know, as Sylvia says, it kind of boils down to some just very simple ideas.
Yeah.
You know, it's really not that complicated.
Occam
razor.
I love Occam's razor. I mean, I use it for everywhere. Also in my private life. Keep the simplest solution is usually the right one. And that's without your life everywhere. I mean, and if you can press it down to the simplest solution, you're bound to find an easier or better solution than, to go through a whole process of difficulties.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Thanks, Tom.
You're welcome.
Thanks, everybody. I loved it again. Thanks, Vanessa. I'll give it over to you.
Yeah, and I'll give it over to Nathan.
Okay.
There's just so much gratitude in my heart right now as I look across the names and faces here of our volunteers. And so before we end our call, I just want to speak to all of you who are here live, just how much of a joy it is to serve alongside you. You totally enrich my life just by being who you are in this meaningful work that we do together. And for those on the recording, just another little plug for an opportunity to meet these amazing individuals. So if you want to be a part of something that's very special, meeting really wonderful people, doing work that really does help change people's lives, mbtevolunteers@gmail.com. It's just an email away. TT's on the other side of that and her team. And we'd love to meet you and help you get plugged in the way that feels well for you, along with your skill sets and interests. So what an amazing Q&A. Tom, thank you so much for this time. I know your answers to other people were enriching for me and as well as for my questions. So thank you for always just being so generous with your time and your care. It's really felt.
Yeah, you're very welcome. It's my pleasure. And that's not just a figure of speech. That is my pleasure to be helpful. That's why I don't mind going over time, because too much of a good thing is hard to get.
Well said. Well said. Thank you, Vanessa, for hosting, and TT for all your work with this. Well, feel free to unmute and thank Tom if you want everyone to say bye to each other before we end here.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you,
You're
Tom.
very welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank all of you. I and MBT Events hope you liked this video. We now have well over 1,000 hours of free video on this YouTube channel. Though these videos are free to our viewers, they represent many thousands of hours in production and editing, and many thousands of dollars invested in video and audio equipment, along with the required computers and software to store and process the raw video into finished products. So far, all of this content has been funded directly out of our own pockets. Be assured, we will always continue to produce free content. It is our life, our purpose, a labor of love that we will continue to pursue as best we can. However, those pockets are not as deep as they used to be. Thus, we are now seeking to augment our resources with support from our viewers. If you find something of significant value in our videos, please consider supporting their production through our Patreon account or through a one-time donation. It would be very much appreciated. The links are in the description below. Thank you.